It was a crisp fall morning when Sam Walker found himself staring out of his apartment window, half-heartedly watching the world move on without him. His phone buzzed on the table, but he couldn't bear to look. Another rejection email. Another door slammed shut. He had lost count of how many job interviews he had attended in the last month. The economy was shaky, and jobs in his field were scarce. The bills were piling up, and each time he looked at his bank account, the balance seemed to shrink a little more. The weight of it all pressed down on him. Sam had worked so hard to get his degree in business management. He'd spent late nights studying, sacrificing weekends with friends, and now here he was struggling to even land an entry-level position. His friends seemed to have it all together. They were moving up in their careers, buying houses, getting engaged. Meanwhile, Sam felt like he was stuck in neutral, spinning his wheels. It was almost as if life had turned into one big game where he never got to play. The day was shaping up to be like any other. Sam grabbed his jacket and stepped outside to grab a coffee from the local cafe. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, but the day still carried a sense of gloom. As he walked down the street, he couldn't help but feel a familiar pang of frustration. He had done everything right, followed the rules, put in the effort, but it didn't seem to matter. The world didn't care about all the effort he had put in. It was like he was invisible, standing in the shadows of everyone else's success. At the cafe, the barista greeted him with a smile, but Sam didn't feel the warmth. He didn't have it in him to smile back. Instead, he stared at the menu, unsure of what he even wanted anymore. His mind was swirling with worries, doubts, and questions about what the future held. How was he supposed to get ahead when everything seemed designed to keep him stuck? When Sam returned to his apartment, he kicked off his shoes and collapsed onto the couch. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. His eyes drifted to the bookshelf across the room, where a dusty pile of books sat, waiting to be read. It was the kind of shelf where half-read novels and self-help books went to die. His mind wandered, thinking about how he used to be so optimistic, so excited for the future. But now it all felt like an uphill battle. As he scanned the spines, one book stood out. It wasn't one of the books he had bought himself, but one his father had left behind. Sam's father had passed away a few years ago, and when he had gone through his belongings, he had come across this book titled Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert T. Kiyosaki. It had always intrigued him. The title alone had sparked something in Sam, but he had never actually opened it. Life had gotten in the way, and the book had become just another unread title on the shelf. But today, something about it called to him. Sam reached over, pulled the book from the shelf, and opened it up. It was a strange feeling, like touching something that belonged to someone else. His father, a man who had always been cautious with money, had never talked much about finances. Sam had always admired his father's work ethic, his ability to make do with what he had. But his father had never been one for high-risk investments or big dreams. He had been content with a steady job and a modest lifestyle. As Sam flipped through the first few pages, he realized that the book wasn't about anything Sam had learned in school. There were no step-by-step guides to climbing the corporate ladder or tricks for acing interviews. No, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was about something entirely different: wealth, mindset, and the way the rich thought compared to the poor. It was a new perspective, one Sam hadn't encountered before. The book introduced him to two central characters: the rich dad, who had embraced the idea of making money work for him, and the poor dad, who believed in working hard for a paycheck. The contrast between the two was stark. As Sam read on, he started to question the foundation of everything he had believed up until that point. He had spent years chasing the traditional path: go to school, get a good job, work hard, and eventually retire comfortably. But what if that wasn't the key to true financial freedom? What if there was another way? What if, instead of chasing after a paycheck, he could learn how to make money work for him? The more he read, the more he realized how much of his life had been shaped by the same mindset his father had: work hard, save, and play it safe. It was a mindset that had kept him secure, but had never allowed him to take risks. Risks that could lead to greater rewards. Sam felt a flicker of excitement, a spark of possibility that hadn't been there before. Sam leaned back on the couch, the book still open in his hands. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but something inside him told him that this book, this new way of thinking, could be the key to turning his life around. Maybe it was time to stop following the same path everyone else was on and start thinking differently about money and success. He turned the page. Sam's eyes moved quickly over the words as he dove deeper into the lessons Kiyosaki had written about. His mind started to race, connecting dots he'd never considered before. Dad wasn't just a book about money. It was about how you think about money, how you view wealth, and how that mindset shapes your actions. For the first time in a long while, Sam felt a sense of clarity. The fog that had been clouding his mind seemed to lift, even if just a little. The first key lesson in the book hit him like a ton of bricks: the importance of financial education. Kiyosaki argued that schools taught kids how to be employees, not how to be entrepreneurs or investors. Sam had learned everything he needed to be a good employee, but nothing about how to grow wealth. No one had ever taught him how to make smart investments, how to build assets, or how to take control of his financial future. He had always assumed that if he worked hard enough and made the right connections, success would come. But now, looking back, he saw how limiting that mindset had been. "The rich don't work for money, they make money work for them," Sam read aloud, more to himself than anyone else. It sounded simple, but the more Sam thought about it, the more it made sense. He had spent his entire career running after paychecks, never stopping to think about how he could make his money work harder for him. Instead of being a slave to his job, he could be building something that would generate income on its own. Passive income, real wealth. It was a concept Sam had never considered before, and yet here it was, staring him in the face. For a long time, Sam had been caught in the trap of believing that if he could just land the right job, his life would magically improve. But now, he was beginning to understand that relying solely on a paycheck wasn't the answer. He needed to shift his focus from earning money to learning how to manage it, grow it, and multiply it. The idea of working for himself was foreign, but it also felt empowering. Flipping through the next pages, Sam read about the importance of assets versus liabilities. The book described how the wealthy focus on acquiring assets, things that put money in your pocket, while the poor and middle class often accumulate liabilities, things that take money out. Sam's apartment was filled with stuff he had bought to make himself feel better in the short term, yet none of it added value to his life. It was just stuff. In fact, it was more of a burden. Every month he had to pay for things like rent, subscriptions, and utilities, but none of it was helping him build wealth. Sam took a deep breath and set the book down for a moment. He thought about the car he was paying off, the monthly bills that seemed to keep piling up, and the lifestyle he had always dreamed of, but never could quite afford. He realized now that he had been living his life backwards, paying for liabilities first and leaving nothing for potential investments that could turn into assets. He had been following the traditional rules: get a job, pay your bills, save a little, hope for the best. But this new way of thinking was different. It required looking at the world through a new lens. Sam stood up and walked over to his window again, staring out at the busy street below. The world seemed so much bigger now, filled with endless possibilities that he had never noticed before. But there was still fear in his heart. Fear that he wasn't capable of making that leap. Fear that he would fail, just like he had failed so many times before. But that's the point, Sam muttered to himself, recalling another lesson from the book. The rich aren't afraid to fail. They fail fast, learn from it, and move on. He had spent so much of his life avoiding failure, afraid that if he made a mistake, he'd be doomed forever. But what if failure wasn't something to fear? What if it was a stepping stone? What if every setback was a lesson in disguise? Sam picked up the book again, the words speaking to him in ways they never had before. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be an overnight transformation. But maybe, just maybe, there was hope. There was a way out of the cycle he had been trapped in for so long. As Sam read further, he found another key lesson: the importance of taking risks and embracing opportunities. Kiyosaki talked about how the wealthy didn't wait for opportunities to fall into their laps. They actively sought them out. They took calculated risks, made investments, and sought new ways to make their money grow. The poor, on the other hand, waited for a safe job or a secure future. They avoided risk at all costs. Sam thought about his own life. He had always been cautious, playing it safe. He'd never taken a risk that felt too big. Even in his career, he had stuck to the traditional path, hoping that if he did everything right, success would come. But now, he saw how this mindset had kept him in a state of inaction. What if he took a chance? What if he stopped waiting for the perfect moment and just went for it? But what did taking a risk look like for him? Sam didn't have a clear answer. He had no experience in investing, no idea where to start. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that taking a small step in the right direction could be the catalyst for something much bigger. The key was to start. And then, as if a light bulb went off in his mind, Sam remembered something his father had always told him. Sam, life isn't about waiting for things to happen. It's about making things happen. Maybe this was the wake-up call he had needed. Maybe now was the time to finally take control of his financial future. Sam closed the book and sat in silence for a moment, processing everything he had just read. His mind was buzzing with ideas, possibilities, and questions. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of empowerment. He knew it was time to stop following the rules that hadn't worked for him and start creating his own path. The next few days felt different for Sam. He couldn't shake the lessons he'd learned from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Everywhere he went, he started noticing opportunities, both small and large. It was as if the world had changed overnight, or perhaps it was his perspective that had shifted. He was seeing things in a way he had never seen before. Sam decided to take action. He wasn't going to dive headfirst into anything risky just yet, but he could start with small, manageable steps. The first thing he did was take a closer look at his finances. Sitting down at his kitchen table with a pen and a notebook, Sam started listing his expenses: rent, utilities, groceries, subscriptions, everything that drained his account each month. He couldn't ignore the obvious anymore. His liabilities far outweighed any potential assets. But that was okay. Sam knew now that the journey to wealth wouldn't be an overnight transformation. It would be a gradual process, one step at a time. He started thinking about the things he could cut out, the expenses he could reduce. Maybe he didn't need the premium cable package. Maybe he didn't need to eat out so often. And maybe, just maybe, he could stop spending money on things that didn't add value to his life. The more Sam thought about it, the clearer things became. If he wanted to build wealth, he needed to stop feeding his liabilities and start investing in things that would pay him back. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. After a few hours of budgeting, Sam decided to take his first step into the world of investing. He didn't have much to work with. His savings account was barely scraping by, but he had enough to begin learning. He opened up an online brokerage account, unsure of exactly what to invest in, but excited by the possibilities. He knew he wasn't going to get rich overnight, but at least he was moving in the right direction. He started small, purchasing a few stocks that seemed like safe bets. He knew it was important to do his research, but even more important was simply to begin. He needed to stop waiting for the perfect time, the perfect amount of money, or the perfect opportunity. The best time to start was now. A few weeks passed, and Sam stuck with his small investments, monitoring his portfolio and learning as he went. He also began reading more about real estate, another area Kiyosaki had emphasized in the book. The idea of buying properties, renting them out, and creating a passive income stream seemed like a distant dream, but Sam had come to realize that if he wanted financial freedom, he needed to think bigger. One night, after another long day of reading about real estate, Sam found himself talking to his friend Chris on the phone. Chris had always been one of those people who seemed to have everything together. He had a stable job, a nice apartment, and a solid savings plan. He was exactly the kind of person Sam had always looked up to. "So, what's new with you, man?" Chris asked after a brief exchange of pleasantries. Sam hesitated. He hadn't told Chris about the changes he was making in his life. He wasn't sure what Chris would think, but he decided to take a chance and share his new mindset. "Well, actually, I've been reading this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad," Sam began, "and it's really changed the way I think about money. I've been trying to learn about investing and even looked into real estate. I'm trying to figure out how to build wealth instead of just working for a paycheck." Chris was silent for a moment, and Sam felt a wave of doubt wash over him. What if Chris thought it was all nonsense? What if he was making a huge mistake? "Wait," Chris finally said, sounding more intrigued than Sam expected. "You're serious about real estate? Dude, that's the way to go. I've been thinking about it myself. I've even got a friend who flips houses." Sam's heart skipped a beat. "Really? You know someone who flips houses?" "Yeah. He started a few years ago, bought a property, fixed it up, and now he's making great money doing it. I could put you in touch with him if you want. He's always looking for new people to help him with his projects." Sam couldn't believe his ears. He had been dipping his toes into the world of investing, but this was an opportunity. "Seriously?" Sam asked, his voice full of disbelief. "Yeah, man. It's all about finding the right deal, the right property. You don't need a ton of money to get started. It's more about finding a good location and making smart choices." Sam didn't know what to say. He had always assumed that real estate was something only rich people could afford to get into. But now, here was Chris, a regular guy, telling him that it was possible for someone like Sam to get involved. Maybe this was the break he needed. "Thanks, Chris. I'll definitely look into it," Sam said, his voice filled with gratitude. As he hung up the phone, Sam's mind was racing. This was it. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. He had no idea where this new path would lead, but for the first time in a long time, he felt alive with possibility. The fear was still there, lurking in the background, but it no longer had the same hold on him. Sam knew that he had a long way to go, and there would be setbacks, but now he had a sense of direction. He was no longer just reacting to life's circumstances. He was taking control of his future. The next day, Sam reached out to the friend of Chris's who flipped houses. They set up a meeting, and as Sam walked into that meeting, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. But one thing was clear. He was no longer standing still. He was taking action. The meeting with Chris's friend Ethan was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. Sam arrived early, pacing in front of the cafe where they had agreed to meet. His palms were sweaty, and his heart beat a little faster than usual. Real estate had always seemed like a foreign world to him, intimidating and out of reach. But today, it felt different. Today, he was determined to push through the discomfort and learn as much as he could. When Ethan arrived, he was nothing like Sam expected. The man in his late 30s wore a simple denim jacket and a casual t-shirt. He didn't look like a typical real estate mogul. Sam had imagined someone polished and well-dressed, perhaps carrying an air of arrogance. Instead, Ethan seemed grounded, approachable. He smiled and extended a hand to Sam, offering a firm but friendly handshake. "So, you're the guy interested in real estate?" Ethan asked, taking a seat across from Sam. Sam smiled nervously. "Yeah, I've been reading a lot about it lately. I never thought it was something I could do, but after talking to Chris, it just seemed like the right time to start learning." Ethan raised an eyebrow. It's good that you're taking that first step. Most people just talk about it. They think they need a ton of money or experience to get started. But that's not true. The key is knowing where to look and being willing to take risks. Sam nodded, trying to mask the swirl of uncertainty in his stomach. He had no idea what he was doing, but he was here, and that was already a start. Tell me, Sam, Ethan said, leaning forward. What's your goal in real estate? Do you want to flip houses, rent properties, or maybe something else? Sam thought for a moment before answering. I'm not sure yet. I've been reading a lot about flipping houses, but I think I need to learn the basics first. I don't even know where to begin. Ethan smiled knowingly. That's okay. We all start somewhere. The first thing you need to understand is that real estate is all about finding value. When I flip houses, I'm looking for properties that are undervalued, properties that have the potential for big returns once they're renovated. And the key is buying at the right price. Sam listened intently, trying to absorb every word. Okay, so you buy a house that's undervalued, fix it up, and sell it for a profit. Exactly. But it's not just about buying any house. You need to know how to assess a property, understand its potential, and calculate the costs of repairs. If you're not careful, you could end up sinking a lot of money into a house that doesn't give you the return you're hoping for. That's where a lot of people go wrong. They don't do enough research before buying. Sam's mind raced as he thought about the logistics. And where do you get the money for these projects? Do you have investors, or do you fund it yourself? Ethan nodded. Both. In the beginning, I used my own savings, but as I started doing more projects, I started working with investors who could fund the renovations in exchange for a percentage of the profits. It's all about leveraging resources and building relationships. You don't have to do it all on your own, but you do need to know how to find the right partners. Sam was beginning to see the pieces fall into place. It wasn't just about buying and selling houses. It was about understanding the numbers, building partnerships, and making calculated decisions. It was a business, one that required knowledge, strategy, and risk management. Ethan continued, another thing to keep in mind is location. You want to buy properties in neighborhoods that are on the rise, areas where you can predict growth. It's not just about buying a cheap house. It's about buying in the right market. Sam's brain was buzzing with new information. He had never considered the importance of location or the need for market research. But now, everything seemed to make sense. The more Ethan spoke, the more Sam realized how much there was to learn and how much he still didn't know. But, Ethan added, you also have to be patient. Real estate isn't a get-rich-quick game. It takes time, effort, and a lot of hard work. The important thing is to start small. Don't try to flip a mansion on your first deal. Focus on smaller properties where the margins are better and you can get your feet wet before you take on bigger projects. Sam took a deep breath, trying to process all the information. The road ahead seemed daunting, but it also felt exciting. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was in control of his future. Real estate might be a challenge, but it was a challenge he was willing to face head on. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me, Ethan, Sam said, his voice filled with gratitude. This has been eye-opening. I didn't realize how much there was to learn. I think I need to do some more research before I jump in, but I definitely want to start looking for opportunities. Ethan smiled. That's the right mindset. Keep reading, keep learning, and most importantly, take action. Don't get paralyzed by overthinking. The worst thing you can do is nothing. Sam stood up, feeling energized. Thanks again, Ethan. I'll be in touch, and who knows, maybe one day I'll flip my first house. Ethan chuckled. I'm sure you will. Just make sure you start small and build up from there. Real estate is a marathon, not a sprint. As Sam walked out of the cafe and into the cool afternoon air, he couldn't help but smile. He felt like he had just taken a giant step toward changing his life. There were still so many unknowns, so many risks. But for the first time in a long while, Sam felt like he was in the driver's seat. He had learned the first crucial lesson of the journey. Knowledge is power, Now, it was time to turn that knowledge into action. Later that evening, Sam sat at his kitchen table again, this time with a laptop open in front of him. He started researching properties in the area, looking for undervalued homes that he might be able to purchase. His head was spinning with excitement and nerves, but one thing was clear. He was no longer the passive observer of his own life. He was taking charge, and he was ready to dive into the unknown. Over the next few weeks, Sam threw himself into his real estate research. Every morning before work, he'd pore over property listings, learning about different neighborhoods, understanding what made certain areas attractive to investors, and figuring out what kind of properties offered the best return on investment. He joined online forums, watched YouTube videos, and read blogs written by experienced real estate investors. Slowly, the world that had once seemed so complex started to make sense. Sam was learning to speak the language of real estate. He also started following up with Ethan, who had continued to offer guidance as Sam navigated the early stages of his journey. Ethan had suggested Sam start with something simple, finding a fixer-upper, one that needed only minor repairs, and flipping it for a quick return. It sounded easy enough, but Sam quickly discovered that flipping houses was anything but simple. The first property Sam seriously considered was a small, 3-bedroom home on the outskirts of town. The house was old, but it had potential. The price was right, much lower than most homes in the area, which made it an attractive option for someone like Sam, who was just starting out. But as Sam drove to the property for the first time, he started to feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The house was surrounded by overgrown grass, the roof was sagging in places, and the driveway was cracked and uneven. He could see why the house had been sitting on the market for so long. But as he walked through the house, Sam could see beyond the worn-out exterior. He imagined what it could look like with a little love and a lot of work. The kitchen could be modernized with new appliances and cabinets. The living room could be opened up with fresh paint and new flooring. The backyard could become an oasis with a little landscaping. Still, the fear gnawed at him. What if I'm overestimating the potential? What if I get in over my head and lose money? He called Ethan later that evening to ask for advice. "Ethan, I'm looking at this property. The price is right, but the place needs work. I'm not sure if I'm biting off more than I can chew." Ethan's voice was calm and reassuring on the other end of the line. "Sam, this is the learning process. Every deal is a little scary at first, but you won't learn until you take that first step. Just make sure you do your due diligence. Get a contractor to give you an estimate on repairs and make sure the numbers add up." Sam nodded, even though Ethan couldn't see him. "Thanks. I'll make sure I do that. I guess it's time to take a risk." The next few days were a blur. Sam met with a contractor who gave him a solid estimate for repairs, and after doing more research on the neighborhood, he felt confident enough to make an offer. The house was still within his budget, and even with the repairs factored in, the potential return seemed worth the effort. He put in an offer and waited nervously. A few days later, Sam received the call. The offer was accepted. His heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was real. But as Sam sat down to finalize the details, he realized just how much was riding on this project. Not just his finances, but his future. The weight of the decision settled on his shoulders, but he knew there was no turning back now. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for, and he was going to see it through. For the next month, Sam threw himself into the project. He worked closely with the contractor, helping to pick out materials, making decisions about paint colors, and overseeing the renovation. The process was grueling. There were delays, unexpected issues, and moments where Sam wondered if he had made a huge mistake. The contractor found a hidden mold problem in the basement, which delayed the timeline and added extra costs. There were days when Sam questioned whether he had the strength to push through. But each time doubt crept in, he reminded himself of the lessons he had learned from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This wasn't just about making money. It was about growing. about learning how to make smart decisions, how to manage risk, and how to build something that would provide him with financial freedom in the future. Ethan continued to check in on Sam's progress, offering advice and words of encouragement when things got tough. "Remember," Ethan would say, "it's never going to be a smooth ride. You have to keep your head down, push through the tough spots, and stay focused on the bigger picture." Slowly, the house began to take shape. What had once seemed like a run-down property was now turning into a beautiful home. Sam started to see the fruits of his labor. Each time he walked through the house, it felt like he was witnessing something magical. He wasn't just fixing up a house, he was building his future. When the renovations were finally complete, Sam took a step back and admired the work. The kitchen sparkled with new countertops and stainless steel appliances. The living room felt open and airy, with fresh hardwood floors and modern lighting. The backyard had been transformed into a peaceful retreat with new landscaping. The house was ready for its next chapter. The final step was putting the house on the market. Sam had spent weeks researching the best price to list it at, taking into account the value of similar homes in the area and the amount he had invested in repairs. When the listing went live, he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would the house sell? Would he make a profit? It didn't take long for buyers to show interest. The first offer came in just a few days later, and after some back-and-forth negotiations, Sam accepted an offer that was higher than what he had expected. The sale went through, and Sam's first flip was officially a success. As he sat at his desk, signing the final paperwork for the sale, Sam couldn't help but smile. This was the moment he had worked so hard for. It wasn't just the money. It was the knowledge, the experience, and the confidence that came with taking a risk and seeing it through. He had proven to himself that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined. And as he walked out of the office, the weight that had once felt so heavy was now lighter. Sam was no longer the person who waited for opportunities to come to him. He was the one who created them. The feeling of accomplishment didn't last long, though. As Sam walked out of the office building, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Chris. "Chris, dude, congrats. I heard about the sale. I knew you had it in you. What's next?" Sam smiled, his fingers quickly typing a response. "Sam, thanks, man. I'm still trying to process it, but I think I might be ready for the next one." He paused, then added, "Sam, it feels pretty amazing, honestly. I'm finally doing something for myself, something that's moving me forward." Chris replied almost instantly. "Chris, hell yeah, man. That's what it's all about. Keep going. I'm proud of you." As Sam sat down on a bench outside the office, he realized that something had changed in him. The journey he had started months ago, spurred by the lessons in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, wasn't just about flipping houses or accumulating wealth. It was about shifting his entire mindset. It was about seeing possibilities where others saw limitations. It was about deciding that he deserved to live a life that was defined by choices, not by the whims of circumstance. He took a deep breath, reflecting on how far he'd come. He wasn't the same person who had been stuck in the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck, worrying about debt and struggling with self-doubt. He wasn't perfect, and he still had a long way to go, but he was no longer standing still. He was moving forward, building momentum, and slowly but surely taking control of his financial future. Sam thought about the future, his future. Real estate had been his first big step, but it wasn't the end of the road. There were still risks to take, mistakes to make, and lessons to learn. But the difference now was that Sam had the confidence to keep going. He knew that if he could succeed once, he could succeed again. The only thing that could stop him was himself, and he wasn't about to let that happen. Over the next few months, Sam worked tirelessly on his next project. He began networking more, attending local real estate meetups, and collaborating with people who had more experience. He reached out to other investors, learning from their successes and their failures. Sam also began to diversify his investments, considering rental properties and looking into different ways to generate passive income. He was slowly building a portfolio, one that would grow with time, effort, and patience. But as the months passed, Sam realized that real estate wasn't just a financial journey, it was personal. Every house he flipped, every decision he made was shaping him into the person he wanted to be. The challenges he faced taught him resilience. The mistakes he made taught him humility. And the successes he celebrated taught him that hard work and perseverance were the key to achieving anything he set his mind to. One evening, after putting the finishing touches on yet another renovation project, Sam sat down to reflect. He opened the familiar book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the pages now worn and creased from being read and reread. He smiled to himself as he thought about how much it had changed his life. The lessons were no longer just words on a page. They were a part of him. They were in the way he looked at money, in the way he made decisions, in the way he built his future. "The rich don't work for money," he read aloud, quoting Kiyosaki's words. He had learned that lesson in his own way. He had stopped trading his time for a paycheck. He had learned how to make money work for him. As Sam looked out the window at the city skyline, he felt a deep sense of pride. This wasn't the life he had imagined for himself just a year ago. Back then, he had been lost in a sea of financial uncertainty, wondering if he would ever break free from the cycle of debt. Now, he had a clear direction, a vision for his future that was taking shape every day. But there was more to it than just money. He thought about the people who had supported him along the way, Chris, Ethan, and all the mentors he had met. He had learned that success wasn't just about doing things on your own. It was about building a network, asking for help when you needed it, and surrounding yourself with people who believed in you even when you didn't believe in yourself. He had learned that his journey wasn't just about wealth. It was about freedom to make choices, to live life on his own terms, and to give back to others. In the future, Sam hoped to mentor others who were where he once was, to show them that it was possible to break free from financial uncertainty and take control of their lives. He wanted to give back, just as others had given to him. Sam closed the book and leaned back in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. He was exactly where he needed to be. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the world. The future was wide open. There were challenges ahead, but Sam was no longer afraid. He was ready to face whatever came his way, knowing that he had the tools, the mindset, and the support to make his dreams a reality. The greatest lesson of all was that it wasn't about the destination. It was about the journey, the small, consistent steps toward a brighter future. The key to success was simple. Don't wait for the perfect time, don't fear failure, and don't shy away from risk. Keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep taking action. Because the greatest opportunity was always just around the corner. It was up to him to find it. And now, Sam knew that he would. With that final realization, Sam understood the truth behind Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Financial freedom wasn't a far-off dream. It was the result of choices, hard work, and a willingness to keep going even when things felt uncertain. And so, his journey continued. If you're feeling inspired by Sam's journey, remember that the power to create your own path is in your hands. Take that first step, no matter how small, and watch how it leads to bigger things. If you found value in this video, go ahead and like it, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that keeps you moving forward. Keep growing, keep learning, and keep taking action. The journey is yours to shape.